Thank you for coming to this workshop. I'm honored that you'd want to come and hear this amazing story about the Batwa Pygmies in southwestern Uganda. So I'm going to go ahead and just tell you the story, and then we'll have time. My assistant is Michelle. I'm Diane Stanton. I'm the executive director of the Kellermann Foundation, formerly the executive director of Uganda Christian University Partners, and worked with Stephen and Peggy Knowles. So thank you for coming. So you want to go ahead. And this is Michelle. Okay, well, Albert Schweitzer, who wasn't the most renowned theologian, but he had a huge heart for his call to Africa. And he said the purpose of human life is to serve and to show compassion and the will to help others. Go ahead. So where do we serve? This is an area of Uganda. It's in the very southwest corner where it's very mountainous. In fact, to get to the Pygmies, which have you been there before? Steve and Peggy? You never went. So it's 8,000 feet up, and it's very cool, not humid. The temperature, the warmest it gets is about 85 degrees, and the coldest it gets is about 65. So we have to take jackets. It's a rainforest, so it rains torrentially. So this is to give you some idea of where we're located. So the capital city is Kampala, which is right above Lake Victoria, and it is about a 12-hour drive to get to the area, to Bwindi, if you fly into Entebbe. Otherwise, lately I've been flying into Kigali, and it's about 4 hours. So it's much easier to get. Go ahead. So there is this really world-famous Bwindi Impenetrable National Park. Hi, Fred. Nice to see you. Welcome.
Thank you.
A graduate of Uganda Christian University. Yay.
I don't think he's a pygmy.
No. But he needs to come and meet them. Yeah, because I'm 5'8", and they're about up to here, so. Yeah. So I was just telling about this forest. It's the largest population of mountain gorillas. And what happened was, if you want to go to the next slide, in 1991, the government of Uganda evicted the Pygmies from the rainforest. They'd lived there about 50,000 years, and the reason we say that number is because of migration patterns. And so they had lived there forever. And when they were evicted out by gun force to create a national heritage site and a tourist attraction, the government gave them no survival tools at all. So the Archbishop of Uganda, who passed away last year, Archbishop Livingston Nkoyoyo, was someone that my husband and I had met on our visit to Uganda in 1994. So I want to back up a little bit and just kind of give you a little bit of my story so that this will kind of make sense to you in terms of how I got involved and got lots of other people involved. But when I was in college, I went around the world for 6 months. You've heard of Semester at Sea, a World Campus Afloat, and my favorite place in the world was East Africa, Kenya actually. And we weren't supposed to go there. We were supposed to go to Madagascar and then Tanzania. But our ship was having trouble, and so we went to Kenya for 2 weeks. And I drove with my roommate. We drove all over, and I went home after that trip and told my parents who had no connection to Africa whatsoever, that I was going to live my life doing something in Africa, for Africa. And my parents were like, what did we do? We shouldn't have sent you around the world. But it was in my heart, and I had met missionaries in my church when I was like 10 years old, and they were from Tanganyika, which is Tanzania. And I was so impressed. I just thought, certainly that wouldn't be my life. I just thought I would go a different direction, but I've been blessed so many times. So in 1994, my husband and I went to Uganda, and my husband was Bishop of Dallas for 22 years. He retired in 2014. And he went to take part in a consecration of a new bishop in the largest diocese of Namarimbi. And at the very time that we were there, this man was elected as the new archbishop. And we had already met him, so he came to our home the next year, and we had a reception for him. And he came up to me, and he said, "I need your help." Well, if you've met him before, of course you knew him. Deep voice, you don't say no. But I said, "Well, how can I help you?" And he said, I was thinking he needed a glass of water or a place to rest. And he said, "I need your help. I need you to save the Batwa Pygmies who are dying." It was such a shocking thing to be asked. I didn't know what to say, except that when I was in college, I actually was studying pygmies. I was an anthropology student, and it was so stunning that he would want to involve me in something to do with them. So I said, "Well, let me pray about it," and instantly, of course, the word came that, well, why not? Why? Who can do that? Who knows how to resettle people? Nobody does. So, and I knew that I wouldn't have to do it alone, that God would be with me. So, go ahead. So, this is the tribe that we serve. Initially, there were about 3,000 of the Batwa that were forced out of the forest. And in the forest, they'd not been exposed to Western life or even the neighboring Bachiga tribe life. They lived solely in the rainforest. You can see the happiness on their faces. They were hunters and gatherers. They lived in their little homes that they made of banana leaves for about 3 months, and then they'd be burned down or the rain would destroy them. So they were nomadic. They were constantly on the move, and they loved their life, and they had lots of stories. So they were horribly miserable when they were forced out. They had nothing that was familiar to them. Go ahead. So, as I said, they lived peacefully, they lived well in the forest, and they also lived well with the mountain gorilla. So it wasn't because of any friction between them that they were forced out. When they came out, the pastors of the local tribe, the Bachiga tribe, were teaching them about Jesus, and they said, "We knew who that was. He came to us in the forest. He just didn't tell us his name." So that was early on when they were forced out, that they knew that they were ultimately going to be okay, that Jesus had visited them. So what we did, after the Archbishop asked me to help, I spent 5 years working on a project of resettling, and that was, I didn't want my name there, I didn't want I didn't want our culture to be present. So we empowered the local people, the local tribe, to teach them how to farm. We bought land for them that we gave to the Church of Uganda to hold for them in perpetuity, so that it's always going to be their land. But we didn't give it to them specifically to their families because they would sell it. They have no future tense. They don't talk about the future, so we knew that in order to protect their home sites that we'd have to give it to the church. So it's been the first 5 years, we did what we could. At least we saved their lives. And we built a little clinic, and we built a little primary school, which is now a huge school with over 1,000 children in it. And but at the end of that period, in 1999, 2000, I realized that we weren't addressing the health issues, because when they came out of the forest, they were getting tuberculosis and, of course, malaria and other upper respiratory diseases. So I happened to be working for another organization that I had an exhibit, and next to my table, it was actually the AAC. I worked with Dr. Knoll. Right next to my table, there was a sign that said Episcopal Medical Mission Foundation. Well, I'd never heard of such a thing. And so I went, there was the head of the organization, Dr. Williams, and I went to him and I said, "Do you work in Africa?" And he said, "No, we don't." I said, "Do you want to work in Africa?" And he goes, "No, we don't." And I said, "Well, we need you to work in Africa." And so I told him the story. At that time, they were only in South America and Central America. And so he said, "You need to come and speak to our doctor." So the next month, I went down to San Antonio and talked to a convention. And as a result of that meeting with Dr. Williams, Dr. Kellermann answered the call. So he and his wife and son went over to Bwindi and spent about 6 weeks assessing the medical needs. They were so in love with the Batwa that they went home, sold everything they had in Northern California, his practice. They closed down, sold their cars, their homes, and moved to Uganda then for the next 10 years. So here we are, the Kellermann Foundation. So in the meantime, I'm working with Uganda partners, and I go and visit them whenever I'm over in Africa. I always took a little side trip, but they formed this 501(c) nonprofit organization and started doing some larger projects. And of course, Dr. Kellermann is famous in this region. He's built the #1 hospital in Uganda, which now has a 128-bed hospital. And they want to work with UCU and have a satellite campus for the medical school. And we have a nursing school. I have to tell you a funny story. Oh my gosh, I'm almost up. You have nothing after this, right?
You're not till what, 4:30?
No, we have nothing after this.
Okay, great. All right, so if you have questions during the talk, we don't have to stop and then do questions. Because it's such a fascinating story, at least it is to me. So these two very wealthy American men from the opposite ends of the country, one from Los Angeles and one from New York City, were doing their bucket list. So they went to trek the gorillas, which is a very popular thing to do. People pay a lot of money, and of course everything we do is right there. So they hear about the work at the hospital. So they went and they met Dr. Kellermann and were so impressed with the hospital, they said, well, what can we do to help? And Scott hadn't really thought out a good strategy or a plan, but he was reminded that there aren't enough health workers in Uganda. So he said, oh, well, how about a nursing school? And they said, oh, okay. How much would that cost? And he said, oh, $500,000. They said, okay. So they built it. And it is beautiful, and the standard of building is just very impressive. It's just a great place. So we started off with about a dozen students. The first semester next semester we'll have about 500 students. But every one of the students that graduate so far, we have 385 students graduating, have passed the national exams. So the course is rigorous, and they get expert, wonderful teachers in. So a lot of things have been happening. So we've got the medical, we've got the nursing, training health workers, but then there's the lives of the Batwa. So what can you do to help them? So you don't want to go in. Somebody said to me recently, a woman came in and a woman called me and she said, well, why don't you have like a model city? I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, they're still living like Africans. I said, well, you mean like build a planned community? And she goes, yes, you need to have one of those and invite all the pygmies to come and see it. And I said, no, that's the opposite of what we do. We let them decide how we don't want to interfere with their culture. We're trying to protect their culture because they lost their home. So they have an African folk tale that goes like this. When God created the world, he gave the other tribes gifts. Some he gave fertile land, others he gave height, others he gave other kinds of gifts of knowing how to do things, knowledge. But when he got to the Batwa, he was out of gifts. So God said, I will give you the forest. This is my gift to you, the rainforest. So then, of course, it's taken away, and they felt abandoned. And they felt like God didn't love them. He didn't care about them. So what we did, and when I say we, I mean I got our whole diocese involved, and then of course it's expanded to other parts of the country. But we, like I said, we try and have as little impact on their culture as possible. We try and provide things that help them become self-sustaining. So go ahead and let's go on to the next.
We'll skip to the names.
There's the mountain gorilla that were priority over the human beings that were living there.
Wow.
And there's a lovely family that's how they lived, with bark cloth and a home made of straw and leaves. And Dr. Scott and Carol there in 2000. And so what they found, of course, in the healthcare was deplorable. People had to come, they'd walk 24 hours to get there to get any kind of medical help. And so many people were dying, especially of malaria. And the life expectancy in the forest was a normal age, probably 48 to 50 for adults, normal for Uganda. They found that it dropped to 28 for adults and 5 for children. Most children were dying. And part of it was HIV, AIDS, and the other, of course, was malaria and then upper respiratory. So the child mortality rate, in 2000, more than 41% of Batwa children did not reach their 5th birthday, which is just like we said, deplorable. So this is a picture of the ficus tree. So you see that beautiful tree on the hill there to the left. And that is where Dr. Kellermann set up his surgery department, and his ICU. And he had, you want to go back to that other picture, he had IVs hanging from trees to try, you can see on the right, to try and help patients. And he realized this is impossible. You know, I'm the only doctor here for 100,000 catchment area. And these 3,000 pygmies. So, go ahead and go. And here they're being carried a long distance. Okay. So, hence the hospital. And he engaged Rotary International, and they were fantastic. They've gotten so many great, huge grants for equipment, and Rotary loves to get involved. So then mentioned the hospital, mentioned the nursing school. So the Batwa Development Program was formed to actually work with the Batwa families and tribes. So we have 11 settlements. Right now we're going to add a 12th of some Batwa that we didn't know were not part of our area, our service area. So we are helping with agriculture, and my goal this year is that every school that we're involved with, we have 20 schools, has a garden where the children learn how to grow fresh vegetables. Before, their meals tended to be rice and beans and no vegetables, and that, of course that's not healthy at all. So you can tell they're growing fruits and lots of vegetables that we've introduced. Some they don't like. You'd be surprised the ones they don't like carrots. Carrots are sweet, right? They don't really like those. But they like cabbage. Lots of cabbage, so we grow lots of cabbages and broccoli and lots of greens. And so that's part of our program is agriculture. And we've hired an expert, John Bosco, who just has the latest knowledge about how to work in a drought-ridden area. And then the second, of course, is education. And we provide free education for any Batwa child that needs help, whose parents will allow them to go to school. This was not part of their culture, and in the beginning they didn't understand why we wanted their children to go away to, walk or go to a boarding school, until they now see, the second generation, that it's making a difference. They're actually getting jobs and they're actually becoming self-sustaining. Go ahead. So my favorite picture of all are the 3 little boys walking along the road. Just a little normal life there. Go ahead. So that's the hospital as it is now, and we're about to build an ICU unit, but it covers a large area. There's actually 1 million people, or 800,000 in an immediate catchment area, but this services anybody who can get there, and we're hoping to have remote medical workers to all of our outside villages. Go ahead. And there's the nursing school, which is beautiful. And those 2 donors I mentioned, they're still involved. So we built this about 5 years ago, and they're still gonna add a boys' dormitory and all kinds of fun things. And part of the Batwa Development Program is teaching mostly women. We do have a male seamstress who's actually probably the best of anybody. But there is a whole project where down below there's a women's center where they gather and they learn new sewing techniques. And here we've just doubled the size of this Banda. So if you were walking down this road and you continued on to the right, that would be the entrance to the park. So obviously when the tourists who come from all over the world come out, ours is the first Banda they see. And so they improved what they sell in there. In the beginning, they were just selling little crafts that they were just learning how to make. And now they're making beautiful baskets. In fact, come by our exhibit and you'll see samples of the Batwa work, but they're quite beautiful.
And what's the name of the park?
It's Bwindi Impenetrable Forest. Yeah. Go ahead. And I mentioned education. All the schools, of course, the children look so smart in their uniforms. So obviously, we're a Christian organization, we're a faith-based organization, and we work with the bishop and the pastors in the Diocese of Chinchizi. And they're very much involved. In fact, the Bishop Dan Zarika is chairman of our board, is chairman of the board there in Uganda. And we consult him on any new thing that we want to do. We just don't go and do it. We consult him and his council. And home building. So when we first started building, we had to strategize on this, because you just don't go in and build, beautiful brick homes with. It needed to be in stages so that they would adapt, and then we let them choose now what kind of house can we help you build. So they have choices of either their traditional house, which is banana leaves, or mudding houses, which I hate. I hate the mudding houses because they only last about 5 years, but bugs get in there and just not very pleasant. So we've bought an interlocking brick machine, so we're giving that a try. It's on a trial basis, and we have people who want to buy more of them, but I've said we need to wait and see if they like them, because if they don't like them, it's a waste of money. So basically, we ask them, what can we do to help you? They say, well, we want better homes. So they had always been wet in the forest, always been wet, until this middle house right here has a tin roof. So what they're getting, instead of getting wet, they're getting noise. Because when it rains, it's loud, but they'd rather be hearing noise than being soaking wet. And so one of the things I did, I came on as executive director 3 years ago, and one of the first things I identified was that they had no places to worship. So these settlements are spread out over a large geographic area, and the main church is way too far for them to go. It would take them 12 hours to walk. So I asked the people that I work with there, I said, what would you think if we built these buildings that had a freshwater catchment system, and they could use these buildings, we call them bandas, as a chapel on Sundays or for community worship, and then during the week they can use it for crafts or any kind of work that they want to do. And it ended up that out of the 11, 8 of them immediately wanted them. And so the other ones were like, why would we want that? We want a big church. Every community wants a huge church. Well, we said, give this a try. So the 8, now everybody wants them. But I have to say, it was so exciting to see that we raised the money for these in 3 months, all 8 of them. So it was really exciting that's something that really took off. So, okay. And I mentioned agriculture, and everything grows there. It's so lush and green. So, better together, our theme, and we don't do things alone. We have many, many partners. Obviously, the Church of Uganda, Rotary International. We have 20 universities that are partners, and lots of them you'd recognize. I think Cornell is one of them. And what we do, I just have recruited two fairly new ones. UT Dallas, which is known for their engineering, and so we're now on our 3rd cycle with them. They're doing some IT work for us at the hospital. They do it free, and they're also organizing students to go next year. And then UT Southwestern Medical School is one of the best medical schools in the country. They have more Nobel laureates than any other medical school in America. And they're wanting to partner with us and send residents and faculty and teach at our hospital. So that's an exciting one. And then, of course, UCU, we don't have all our partners listed here, but we're members of the Anglican Global Mission Partners, but you know, we just all network and, you know, talk about ways of improving our work here in the U.S., running our nonprofits, saving money, and also working in our countries. Okay? So here's just a little synopsis of the progress we've made. So starting in 2000, medical care, as I showed you, was under the ficus tree with IVs. 41% of Batwa children died before their 5th birthday. 45% of children born to HIV-positive mothers were HIV positive. They had no land, no home, no place to worship. So now we have this fabulous hospital with excellent care. 96% of Batwa children celebrate their 5th birthday. 100% of children born to HIV-positive mothers are HIV negative. And then we're going to add this new settlement, so 12 settlements with homes, clean water, schools, and worship bandits. And we have lots of teams that like to go and do projects. I was listening to a talk earlier today, and somebody was asking about short-term missions, which we do a number of. All throughout the year we have mission trips going. And what sometimes happens is people are so moved and touched by what they see that they come up with ideas. And some of them are great ideas. Others are really not good ideas. So we have to, you know, do team training before we go because, you know, we're innovators, aren't we, in America? We go and, you know, we have things that are available to us, but not everything works there. For example, one of our team members recently wanted to supply every village with a water filter project. So everybody gets all excited about it, and you know, you get it all set up, and then the team leaves, and then they put it away because Rotary actually provided cisterns, and there's natural springs of fresh water. So we have to kind of monitor, you know, what's going to work there and what's not going to work. So. So the challenges. Certainly there were horrendous health conditions when Dr. Kellermann arrived, of course. They had lack of resources, lack of trained experts, unreached people, lack of power, facilities, and sanitation. Yet the benefits, our mission goals are to protect the dignity of their culture, share the gospel, so we do that in everything we do. We love to hear their stories. And there's a program that one of our long-term missionaries presented to them. It's Bible storytelling, where you teach one of the gospel stories to the Batwa, then they repeat it back several times, and then they go and they share it with their villages, and it seems to be working where they're the ones that are sharing the stories. Certainly improving living conditions, build partnerships with experts, foster new friendships. So what happened after I started this resettlement project, about 2 years into it, so in 1997, I went to visit, and I was surrounded by a group of women, tiny little Batwa women, and they wrapped their arms around me, and the bishop interpreted. They said, "We feel like whole people now." And I thought, isn't that what God does? You know, He blesses our work and gives that sense of wholeness. We can't do it. We can't do that ourselves. We might think we have good ideas, but we really rely on prayer and His guidance for everything. So we just feel like that's really why we do what we do, isn't it? You know, Albert Schweitzer had it partly right. You know, we're called to serve, and the whole picture is that Jesus provides that wholeness. So, okay. Okay. So, any questions? Yes.
So, I'm curious why there weren't malaria mosquitoes in the jungle.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, but they didn't live around a water source, for one thing. They had to go and find water elsewhere, but they just did not get malaria. That wasn't what they died of. So, good question. Yeah,
I just wondered, or you think a rainforest,
right.
You have to have
There'd be a lot of
standing, you have to have
mosquitoes.
standing water.
You have to have standing water to attract, yeah, which,
not much.
well, they didn't have standing water, so, yeah. No, they went to the springs, the natural springs, which was running water. So it wasn't sitting water.
And,
Yes.
I'm curious, are they, like in terms of their education,
Mhm.
I remember that one of them that actually graduated up to the next level.
Mhm.
I mean, is the idea that, I mean, I'm kind of thinking like other indigenous
Mhm.
peoples who just remain in their own culture and don't really leave that culture. Is that something that they wish to, or some of them do, or how does that work?
So it hasn't worked out that we have a large enough population of college graduates yet. We've had 2, and we have more. We have about 5 more that are being prepared. And the idea they have is to come back and better their people, better their culture. So it's not sending them off. Our goal is primary education. Secondary education would be great, but most of them don't really go that far. They're needed at home, or they learn what they need. But if we can have a generation of people that can read and write and have knowledge of the world, geography, a little cultural history, that's the level we're at right now.
And you just teach in the local language?
Actually, English. English is the language. So the parents now, so think 25 years ago next year is the silver jubilee of this resettlement. The parents, most of them still speak their own dialect. And it's hard to learn when you're older, as we all know that. The children all learn English. So when we go, we can talk to them. And then they try and talk to their parents. So in the next generation, it'll all be English speaking. So, and that is their decision, not ours. That's their decision.
So they're not continuing with their current diet?
So
They're not doing
we encourage them to, and we have Wycliffe that's recording their language, but it's a difficult language to record. It's not. It's kind of a dialect of the local Ugandan, but very few people understand it. So fortunately, when we go, we have people that do, that have grown up there. So yeah.
Well, also, the interesting thing is that English is the only national language in Uganda. So you're not, I mean, for the whole country.
Yeah.
So I think that's a little different than if there were a national African language and they were going to.
Right, like Swahili and Tanzania and Kenya, yeah. But, yeah, you had another question?
Well, I apologize that I was late, so you might have already covered it, but are they Christian, the Batwa people?
So thank you, because I meant to address that. When they were living in the forest, they were monotheistic. They believed in one God. They do have witch doctors, and they use herbal medicines. And that's been a bit of a struggle for our doctors, is trying to, not force them to change their thinking, but to accept that real medicine might be more helpful than some of the herbs. So they work with the witch doctors. But in terms of religion, they are taught Bible stories. Christianity, it's a natural. Uganda is a Christian country for the most part, and it was a natural thing for them to want to do. So it hasn't been forced on them; it's offered for them. So,
They
but
don't actually have their own priests or pastors?
so they don't yet. We haven't raised up any potential clergy, but we have a lot of clergy in the Diocese of Chinchizi. In that area alone, there are about 85 clergy that work with the different tribes. So,
Where were they resettled from?
so that's okay. The rainforest was just right here, and
Still part of Uganda.
yes, in the southwestern region of Uganda, and they were forced out to the next plot of land, which is not a rainforest. So, if I could say one more thing, I want to just say that Pygmies, it's a people type. There are Pygmies. There are Pygmies all over the world. Did you know there are Japanese Pygmies? You already know there's Amazon Pygmies, and of course Congolese, and And the reason they're called pygmies is that they're small frame. So they tend to be 4 feet to 4.5 feet tall. The children, the babies are born, they are itty bitty, and they're full term. They're just tiny little babies. So I was at a dinner one night with a former governor of Texas, who's a very small framed, about 5 feet tall man. And sitting at the table, somebody asked me, "How are the pygmies doing?" There are about 12 people at this table. My husband's sitting down on one end with the wife, and I'm sitting here with the governor. And I said, I think they're doing really well. And the man said, "Well, are they getting any taller?" And I said, they are. The children, it's hard to distinguish them. If you didn't recognize facial features, they were under the canopy of the rainforest. So they weren't exposed to the sunlight. Fred, you got a lot of sunlight when you were growing up in Messino, right? Me too. But anyway, so the governor slammed his hand down on the table and yelled, "Baloney, baloney. If that were true, I'd be 6'8". And I was like, whoop, whoop, whoop. So, yes.
There's a group of pygmies in the desert area in Africa, though, right? In the southern.
In the Kalahari Desert area. It's probably the same. It's the same tribal group. I mean, the reason, I think I mentioned the migration patterns. They came from the north and they came around and they spread. And then most of the ones all the ones that we know about, and they're all from the same Batwa, but they're called different things. When you get up north into the Congo, they have a different name. There's an Ituri rainforest. So this particular group. We'll help anybody who needs our help within a certain region. But, so there probably are others, but in the desert, but they would have come from a forest.
Oh, you think so?
Well, if you have to, the reason they're pygmies is that they've not had sunlight.
Oh, I thought
Vitamin D.
They weren't getting enough.
Our diet
Yeah,
too. Diet can, yeah. So I've been kind of watching the studies on these, and there's debate whether it's genetic. But I've witnessed the fact that these children are now normal height. They grow taller than their parents. So I can only think that part of that has to be the change of environment and the better diet.
I was going to say nutrition.
Yeah, nutrition too.